Usually when we talk about solving a problem in our lives, there's this underlying assumption that spotting the issue is the hardest part.
Right. Like once you see it, the rest is easy.
Exactly. Like imagine you have a leaky pipe in your house. Once you finally notice the water dripping, you call a plumber. The problem is identified, so the action just naturally follows.
Yeah, that makes sense logically.
But what happens when you see the leak, you're watching it ruin the floorboards, you completely acknowledge it's destroying your house, and you just put a bucket under it and walk away?
It is an incredibly frustrating paradox, honestly. We tend to believe that awareness, automatically generates action, but there is this profound psychological gap between knowing you have a destructive habit and actually being ready to change it.
Yeah, it's like a waiting room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of people spend years or even decades living in that specific waiting room, just staring at the bucket as it slowly overflows.
Well, today we are exploring the mechanics of that agonizing gap. And to do that, we're doing a deep dive into a really insightful article published in Psychology Today by Dr. Peg O'Connor.
She's a philosophy professor, right?
She is. And what she does here is map out the literal mental geometry of behavioral change. But before we get into the weeds, I want to clarify the scope for you, the listener.
Because it's not just about what we traditionally think of as addiction.
Right. The source material explicitly discusses alcohol and other drugs, sure, but Dr. O'Connor makes a point to really broaden the definition to include behavioral loops.
Which is so important.
It is. We are talking about gambling or even, compulsively scrolling TikTok at 2 in the morning when you have to be awake in 4 hours. So this framework applies to any destructive cycle you feel trapped in.
Yeah, the behavioral mechanics operate on the exact same fundamental principles, whether the dependency is chemical or digital.
Digital, exactly.
The psychological barriers to change, the way we defend those habits, and how we eventually break them, they share a nearly identical architecture.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to figure out why knowing you have a problem isn't enough to stop it, we really have to look at the precursor, like why it takes us so long to even admit the leak exists in the first place.
It's a denial phase.
Yeah. The source points out that reaching the point of even acknowledging a problem is usually hard won. And that's because we utilize an entire arsenal of self-deception to preserve the illusion that, hey, everything is fine.
It is a defense mechanism. Full stop. Dr. O'Connor notes that we deny, we rationalize, and we minimize until we are literally blue in the face.
Right.
We pull off these complex, nifty feats of misdirection. A really common one is downward social comparison.
Oh, man. I think we all do this.
We do. We look around and point to people who appear to be in far worse shape than we are. We say things like, well, I'm not doing those harder drugs, or I haven't lost my job like that person did.
I've always wondered about that. Like, are people doing that consciously? Are they actively lying to themselves? Or is it...
It's largely happening on autopilot.
Really?
Yeah, it's driven by a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. When you are engaged in destructive habits, there's this massive, painful clash between your core identity, like who you believe you are, and the reality of your actions.
Right, because nobody wants to think of themselves as out of control.
Exactly. Living with that dissonance is mentally exhausting. So your brain works overtime to alleviate the pain without actually changing the behavior. Pointing at someone worse off isn't just a casual excuse.
It's a strategy.
It's a strategic deployment of attention away from the self. It neutralizes the immediate psychological threat.
Wow. And the article also calls out another specific tactic, which is trying to, balance the scales by pointing out what is actually going well in our lives.
Oh, the justification phase.
Yeah. As I was reading this, I kept picturing a horribly corrupt corporate accountant.
An accountant. Okay.
Yeah.
I like this.
Stick with me. So this accountant is trying to hide massive, systemic, company-destroying debt, right? So what do? At every board meeting, they constantly point to one tiny little department that happens to be highly profitable.
Deflecting the attention.
Exactly. They're like, yes, the building is literally on fire, but look at the incredible margins in the mailroom. And we do that to ourselves.
We completely do.
We say, I might be drinking too much, but look how well I'm doing at work. I just got a promotion.
That accountant analogy is spot on, really, because it illustrates how we create a localized reality. By hyper-focusing on that one positive column in the ledger, the accountant or the person struggling with a habit, they manufacture a narrative of success.
But the debt is still there.
Exactly. Accounting tricks don't change the math. Eventually, the misdirection fails. The cognitive load of maintaining that massive illusion just becomes too heavy, the debt comes due, and the truth becomes undeniable.
So when that ledger finally collapses and you can't avert your gaze anymore, you accept the truth. You accept you have a problem.
Which is a huge moment.
It is. Now, traditionally, the cultural narrative around self-help tells us that this moment of acceptance is the finish line.
Right, the "I admitted I'm cured" trope.
Yeah, or at least the definitive turning point. But Dr. O'Connor reveals something wild here. Acceptance is actually a highly dangerous crossroads.
It is not the automatic cure we assume it to be. Not at all.
Why is that?
Well, acceptance simply strips away the denial. But then it forces a choice between two very different psychological paths. The source labels these as the path of resignation and the path of readiness.
Okay, let's explore the darker path first. Resignation. This is where a person accepts the problem but adopts a fatalistic belief that, well, this is just how they are.
Yeah, they believe there is literally nothing they can do about it.
The source uses a heavy but honestly very common example. Say someone has been sober for a stretch of time, but they slip up and relapse. On the path of resignation, that relapse is weaponized.
Yes, it's taken as definitive proof that they're fundamentally incapable of change.
Which is heartbreaking.
It really is.
Yeah.
This is where acceptance morphs into a dangerous certainty of failure. The individual accepts the label of the addiction or the bad habit, but they attach a sense of permanence to it. It becomes their entire identity.
Like shifting from an action to a trait.
Precisely. They move from saying, "I have a problem with procrastination," to "I am a failure." And once a behavior is fused with your identity like that, your brain just stops looking for solutions. It perceives the trait as an unchangeable law of nature.
But wait a second, this completely challenges the core tenet of almost every recovery program or self-help book out there.
How so?
Well, we are constantly told that admitting you have a problem is the first step. How can the very thing we are told to do actually be fatal to our progress?
Because admitting you have a problem is only useful if it's paired with the belief that you possess the agency to address it.
Ah, the agency.
Right. Acceptance without agency breeds despair. It's the difference between acknowledging a hurdle in your path versus believing you are entirely paralyzed.
That makes so much sense.
If you accept a flaw but surrender your power to change it, you have essentially given yourself permanent permission to maintain the destructive cycle.
Right.
You've removed the guilt, but you kept the habit. That is the trap of resignation.
So the goal is to obviously avoid resignation and step onto the alternative path stemming from acceptance, which is readiness.
Correct.
How does someone get there? Does it just require like a sudden massive surge of willpower?
No, actually, willpower is finite and often pretty unreliable. Readiness, according to the source, happens when a person simply reaches a tipping point where the scale of consequences shifts permanently.
What does that look like in practice?
Dr. O'Connor notes that on the path of readiness, the drawbacks of the behavior significantly outweigh the benefits. In fact, she points out that for many people at this stage, the benefits have long fled the scene.
Meaning the original reward you used to get from the habit isn't even there anymore.
Exactly.
You aren't doom scrolling TikTok at 2 a.m. because it's fun or because you're finding great content. You're just doing it because your brain is caught in a loop.
And stopping feels worse than continuing.
Right.
Neurologically, the dopamine reward has diminished, but the compulsion remains. You are engaging in the behavior merely to stave off the negative feelings of withdrawal or anxiety.
Wow.
Because the benefits are entirely gone, the person reaches a profound logical realization. They have absolutely nothing to lose by trying to change. The pain of staying the same finally eclipses the fear of changing.
That's powerful. But once you are on that path of readiness, how do you protect it? Because it feels like you could easily slide right back into resignation if you aren't careful.
It's very fragile at first.
This is where the source transitions from philosophy to, like, practical mechanics. Dr. O'Connor argues that maintaining readiness requires a literal shift of gaze. We have to actively manage where our mind looks in time.
The mechanics of our psychological gaze are absolutely critical here.
Okay.
The source breaks this down into specific directions, starting with the danger of looking backward.
Staring at the past.
Right. When people are active in their addictions, or deeply entrenched in a bad habit, they often focus heavily on the past. They fixate on who they used to be, the opportunities they've lost, or the people who have wronged them.
Well, yeah, staring into the past feels like a guaranteed way to slide right back down into resignation. If you're constantly looking at a highlight reel of your failures or grievances, you're going to feel totally defeated.
Exactly.
So logic would say, okay, turn around and look at the future. Focus on the goal. But the source warns against looking too far forward, too.
Because looking too far into the future introduces a totally different kind of psychological paralysis. The sheer scale of permanent change can just crush you.
Like saying forever.
Yes. The prospect of never drinking again or never engaging in a comforting habit again is overwhelming. The human brain struggles to process the concept of forever.
It's too abstract.
It is. When faced with an infinite timeline of self-denial, ego depletion sets in immediately. The magnitude of the task replaces readiness with resignation simply because it feels impossible.
I kept trying to visualize this tension, and I came up with an analogy. Here's where it gets really interesting for the listener.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you are climbing a treacherous, incredibly steep mountain. If you only stare at the summit like the forever goal, you will be paralyzed by the massive distance and how small you are. Your legs will give out before you even start.
Right, the scale's too big.
But if you only look down at your boots, fixating on the muddy trail you just walked up, you'll lose your bearings and walk right off a cliff.
That captures the dynamic perfectly.
Yeah.
Carrying the weight of the past and the entirety of the future simultaneously is a cognitive load no one can bear.
So what's the solution?
Well, the source navigates this by discussing the balance of looking up versus looking down. You must look up just enough to see a way forward and confirm your general direction.
Right.
But then you have to constantly glance down so you don't trip over the immediate obstacle that is only one single step away.
You have to master the micro goal. The source offers a very specific reframing technique for this. Instead of letting the crushing thought of, I will never have a drink again, enter your mind, you trade it for something smaller.
I am not going to have this drink right here and right now.
Exactly. And the article notes you might have to literally say that to yourself repeatedly, minute by minute at first.
By shrinking the timeline, you effectively reduce the cognitive load. Thinking in shorter increments of time acts as a protective mechanism for your fragile readiness.
Because it's manageable.
Yes. You aren't committing to a lifetime of struggle. You are only responsible for the present moment. You give your brain a task it can actually complete. Winning the next 5 minutes is achievable. Winning forever is just abstract.
Okay, so managing our gaze and time makes perfect sense. We know how to look forward without being flattened, and we know not to look backward and get trapped in rumination.
Right.
But time is only one dimension. What happens when your immediate physical environment is working against you?
This brings us to the final crucial gaze mentioned in the article, which is looking side to side. We are talking about peripheral vision and navigating the actual physical space you inhabit.
The source points out that early in the process of behavioral change, we are often stuck in familiar places. Like we're surrounded by the exact same people we used with, or the same environmental triggers that initiate the doom scrolling.
Is an environmental trap.
It is. But as we begin to change our behaviors, something shifts in our awareness. Previously invisible options start to appear in our peripheral vision.
This raises an important question about how addiction actually affects our perception. Addiction and compulsive habits actively create tunnel vision, both metaphorically and neurologically.
How so?
When your brain is seeking a specific dopamine release, it naturally filters out anything that isn't related to acquiring that reward. Your focus narrows entirely to the substance, or the screen, or the casino.
You literally can't see anything else.
Right. But as you interrupt that cycle, your awareness naturally expands. You start to see that, hey, some people are incredibly supportive of you. You also start to notice people who used to share your habits, but who have changed and are now living healthier lives.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I want to ground this in physical reality because the philosophy is beautiful, but the application is really tough.
It takes practice.
When you're deeply entrenched in a bad habit, your world feels incredibly small. Let's take the person doom scrolling in bed at 2 a.m. Their phone screen is literally forcing their eyes into a narrow central focus in a pitch-dark room. How do they actually execute a side-to-side gaze in that moment of total isolation?
It requires a physical disruption of the environment. Looking side to side in that scenario isn't just a metaphor. It means actively, physically turning your head away from the light source.
Breaking the smell.
Yes. It means looking at the sleeping partner next to you and recognizing a relationship that matters more than the algorithm. Or it means intentionally putting a physical book on your nightstand earlier in the day.
Oh, I love that.
So that when you force your eyes to look left or right, a different, healthier option is physically occupying your peripheral vision.
It's engineering your environment to offer an escape route when the tunnel vision kicks in. You have to put things in your periphery on purpose.
Exactly. You are planting evidence that a different reality exists. And finding these new, healthy options or role models in your periphery provides the one critical element that has likely been in short supply during the years of self-deception:
Which is?
hope. Seeing tangible, living proof that change is possible dismantles the lie of resignation. As Dr. O'Connor emphasizes, hope is the ultimate driver of readiness.
Man, that is a masterclass in behavioral change. Whether it's a serious substance issue or just trying to break a frustrating daily cycle, it really all comes down to reclaiming your agency.
It truly does.
It's about recognizing that armor of self-deception, understanding that acceptance is only half the battle, and then intentionally managing where you gaze forward, backward, up, down, and side to side.
It's realizing that your attention is a tool you can actually wield, rather than a reflex you are a victim of. But before we wrap up today, there is one final, really profound implication that emerges from this source material.
What's that?
It's specifically regarding how we interpret our own failures. It builds on what we discussed earlier about the path of resignation, where people use a relapse or a slip-up as definitive proof that they cannot change.
Right. The idea that a single mistake is weaponized to confirm you are permanently flawed.
We need to ask why the human brain does this. Why are we so quick to use negative evidence to condemn ourselves while completely ignoring the positive evidence?
That's a great question.
This is driven by an evolutionary negativity bias. Our ancestors survived by remembering the one poisonous berry, not the 10 safe ones.
Ah, survival instincts.
Right. We are hardwired to hyper-focus on threats and failures to protect ourselves in the future. But in the context of personal growth, this survival mechanism completely backfires.
Because it tells us the attempt itself is the threat.
Exactly. Think about it. If a relapse is somehow undeniable proof that you can't change, why isn't the preceding period of sobriety, whether it was a week, a month, or a year, proof that you can?
Great, really? That's wow.
You literally did it. The neurological pathways for success were actively forged. The evidence of your capability is sitting right there in your own history, but the negativity bias blinds you to it.
We let the leak define the whole house instead of remembering the times we successfully grabbed the wrench and tightened the pipe.
Beautifully said.
That is such a powerful reframing, and I want to leave you, the listener, with that thought to mull over. Examine your own life right now. Where are you acting like that corrupt corporate accountant in reverse?
Ignoring the profits to focus on the debt.
Yes. Where are you using selective negative evidence against yourself to stay trapped on the path of resignation while completely ignoring your own demonstrated capacity for success? Challenge your own ledger.
It's time to shift the gaze.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking side to side and remember the very next step is the only one that matters. Take care.